Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRTrader.com. He's speaking to us from Arizona. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Glad to be back, Jim.
Mark, do we have a special offer for our listeners?
We do at VRTrader.com. We're going to still use the promo from last year until we change the code. It's at VRTrader.com. It's 2021 half off, 2021 HALFOFF. And you enter that in a little promo code slot when you order a subscription, a little box there for a promo code, and that'll save you 50% on the subscription. Also want to say, as a disclosure, I am not a financial advisor, nor do I provide financial advice.
But what the heck, at least you're informed.
That's right, we do education.
Mark, you're in Arizona. What's your take on the Canadian Freedom Convoy to Ottawa and the subsequent convoys to Canadian border crossings?
Well, I'm very disappointed and not too surprised by the actions of your Prime Minister, and seems like I share the view of the India's ambassador Deepak Vohra, who had just cries out that we were experiencing blatant hypocrisy here. As you know, last year thousands of farmers protested in Delhi, and that caused blockades, and Trudeau was in support of the protesters and urged the Indian government to have a dialogue with the disgruntled farmers. So it's obviously showing a different side of his demeanor, personality, his politics. Very disappointed. Big supporter in the Freedom March and the anti-vaccine mask protests. People are entitled to express their freedom, and unfortunately, he's got another 4 more years of Trudeau in power. So we'll see what happens. I think he's going to be voted out. He already has a minority position, I understand, in the government anyway. But this is not going to secure his reelection.
So interesting. He was okay with blockades by Indian farmers, but not by Canadian truckers. He also refused to meet with them or talk with them.
Right. We have a similar problem here. Like, just politicians are all messed up. It's like they pick their wars and their prizes for whatever reason. I mean, here we have all the press. Of course, it's around the world, not just here in the U.S. But we're worried about Ukraine and the Ukrainian border. Meanwhile, the U.S. border is in jeopardy down by Mexico, as you know, and we're focused on the Ukrainian border when we should be having troops down at our own southern border protecting our own country. So it just shows you where politics and mental illness seem to overlap. You know what I mean? It's like, well, what do you really believe in, and what's really important? So unfortunately, they pick the moment and they pick the timing and they do it all wrong, and we see it from government authorities all the way down to the financial people like the Federal Reserve in this country, who doesn't know what they're doing and never knew what they were doing and continue to not know what they're doing and should have been abolished years ago. Powell, for example, we're changing the subject, but he's messed up his calls in the last few years, and now they don't know what to do about inflation, and they'll make the wrong move, as they always seem to do, and they react rather than do things in advance and prepare, and they shouldn't, frankly, be in existence. The free market should make the determination, not a government agency who has already proven, with the U.S. dollar down 93% or 97% in value since it was created, that they're incompetent. So from politicians to Fed financial officials, we just run an incompetent situation, and we as individuals have to try to protect ourselves financially. and perhaps even politically, where we have to adjust where we live and how we live to overcome their own stupidity.
Now, the Fed 2 years ago said if inflation shows up, we have the tools to deal with it. Well, inflation is truly entrenched now, and where are these so-called tools?
They're late, and they just don't, like, they overreact at the wrong time. It's the old joke. Of course, I thought it was more of a joke, but apparently others have quoted it too. And Alan Greenspan, I've mentioned this before, he was compared to a New York City taxi cab driver, where he would slam on the brakes and then slam on the accelerator, and the Fed continues to follow that policy. They start slamming on the brakes, and they have to release them dramatically because they realize they did the wrong thing. They'll do the wrong thing again. They'll find out that they're going to overreact now, and then they'll have to retrench. I mentioned this, I think, several weeks ago. I wouldn't be surprised, even though the conventional view is that rates are going to go up 0.5% or whatever, we could be at 0% by the end of the year or next year. They're going to have to reverse policy, either another outlier event or an overreaction on their part. Something's going to trigger it. They don't know what they're doing, and there's no reason to. And in fact, raising interest rates 0.5% really has no bearing on the problem. The problem was COVID. It was supply shortages. It was weather that you saw in Canada alone. What happened with you had the bad floods and storms where cows and chickens are dying, and there's shortages of food and prices go up. By raising 0.5% interest rate, does that stop chickens and cows from dying or the weather from exerting influences on the planet and supply shortages developing for reasons such as people don't want to go to work and they're afraid of COVID and they don't want to wear masks, or they do want to wear masks because they don't want the vaccine, or they do want the vaccine? I mean, none of this has to do with the Federal Reserve or the government's imposition on rates. So it's just total stupidity, and they're going to do something stupid, and it's not going to really have any effect other than it creates a psychological negative to the financial markets that have to adjust pricing based on anticipation of higher rates. So it's already happening. It may all change. It may all change very dramatically. We'll see. It'll be really interesting. Meanwhile, we'll trade the markets around the stupidity, and we'll hopefully can make some money.
Well, when the Fed was invented back in, I think, 1913, around then, they said the whole idea of the central bank was to prevent recessions and depressions, and friend of the show, Bob Hoy, has pointed out, since then there have been at least 18 recessions. So whatever they were supposed to do hasn't worked. Why would it work this time?
Right. And, if you read The Creature from Jekyll Island, the classic book on the creation of the Federal Reserve, it's about 600 pages. You realize early on that the Fed was created and owned by the banks themselves. It's a private corporation. It's not really it's a federally chartered corporation, but it's separately run, and the shareholders are the banks themselves. And the thing is, the average person doesn't really understand what's going on here, and it's an institution which should never have been created, and it was created because the banks wanted to exert control on the government at the time and own the government, and that's really what it's all about. And unfortunately, you got to read the book to really understand the whole scenario. But at some point, it'll be abolished, and I don't know if it's in 10 years or 100 years. Eventually, it'll be abolished because its incompetence has already been demonstrated, and they do more jawboning too than actual movement. It's really interesting because right now rates have been moving up, but the Fed itself has not raised any rates. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be funny if suddenly they decide not to, and they realize all this I call jawboning. They just put out the word, we're going to do it. Everybody gets scared. The markets start to adjust, and then they actually don't do it. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's a possibility. They've done this before, and they just do a lot of talking, and every day you're getting a quote from another Fed member. He's in Dallas or he's in this part of the country or another, and he just had an interview. Oh, I think this is what we should do. We should do more. We should do less. It's like a comedy of errors. I mean, in my entire career, this is going over 45 years now, listening to this nonsense. It just never stops. And then the press, financial press, just eats it up. Oh, the Fed chairman said this, and the Fed chairman said that, or the other members did this or didn't do that. I mean, it's just insane. So a lot of it is just talk. And they do accomplish some objectives by talking. It'd be funny if they ended up not doing the rate hike, and they just scared everybody, thinking that it was going to be hiked, and maybe that scare might try to temper speculation in the markets, which is apparently what they're trying to do on a certain level. But is it really that, or is it inflation? They really can't control inflation. I mean, it's out of their control. I mean, right now it's out of their control based on what's happening in the world. I mean, whether Russia invades Ukraine or not, you've got oil prices high, you've got natural gas prices high. As I mentioned a few moments ago, you got shortages every place. How's the higher interest rates going to change that? It's not. So it's really a mess, and we'll find out how it all plays out. But as I mentioned, and I'm being repetitive here, I mean, it does offer trading opportunities in the markets. They got a lot of people scared. But if you look at the market, it's still a bull market. I mean, sure, it's come down a little bit, and it might come down a few percentages more. Do you think this is going to change the big picture, which is going to probably take the Dow up to 60,000 or some incredible number here in the next 5 or 10 years? And no, of course it's not. So this is just an opportunity for those who like to trade, I guess, short the market for a short period of time and then reverse and go long again. But real companies are making money, and not everybody is tied to the so-called inflation scenario. So it's just a big game, and I wouldn't be surprised if the market suddenly reverses and has a hell of a rally.
We'll have more with Mark Leibovit right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit. Mark, what do you really like right now, considering a lot of people think the markets or the stock markets are topping?
There's a lot of stuff to like. A lot of stocks that have corrected and have come down recently. Some of the big names. I don't want to mention specific names. That's more in the newsletter, but they're undervalued groups out there. We mentioned the cannabis stocks, for example, which are still very depressed. Of course, we mentioned gold and silver here on the interviews in the last several weeks, and they started to move higher. They were very depressed for a long period of time. A lot of the financial stocks, like the banking stocks and so forth, as rates go up, they make more money, and the financial stocks, at least for the short term, have been doing a bit better. And we're always just trying to find groups that are interested. The solar stocks, which were darlings for a long time, have pulled back. The solar movement has not ended by any stretch. There's still opportunity there. And, a lot of individual names, again, that we post in the letter, look attractive to us, things that were held back a bit, that haven't moved higher in recent weeks. Another group is the gun stocks. I think I mentioned that before. They're depressed. So defense areas are still strong. So they're, I guess, throwing out a few sectors, but individual names are stuff that comes up just about daily. So, we're in this time frame where it's no surprise we're seeing some volatility in the market. I talked about the groundhog effect, February 2nd, 2 weeks either side of that. Historically, the markets tend to pull back. You're into the February-March period where you have the vernal equinox coming up. So on many occasions, markets post a low around mid-March. You've got the Ides of March. You just look at the charts. I mean, it's a cyclical, seasonal effect of this time of year. It's not too surprising that if you look back how many February, March periods have been choppy or negative, and then we come out and we have a big rally. Not to say the market couldn't have more risk. Depends, what happens in the news environment and so forth. But I think you're going to see a big V-type formation, coming down on the V and then exploding on the right side of the V back to new highs, and it could be by the end of the year or into next year. So, take advantage of the correction. If you want to time it perfectly, I guess you wait till mid-March and see what the market's doing, since there have been some lows in that time frame. We saw that in March of 2020, for example. But again, we got to watch it day to day. The news is so manipulated, and there's so much nonsense going on about day to day. But bottom line is, this is just, I think, a manipulated event. I wouldn't be surprised if Putin went short the market. So as crazy I am. I mean, before 9/11, we had heard stories about various Arab countries or Arab players being short, knowing that 9/11 was going to happen and the World Trade Center was going to be hit. And this wasn't nonsense. There have been some documents proving that this actually did occur. So I wouldn't be surprised if Putin's a pretty sharp guy. Get short the market and buy gold and threaten to invade Ukraine and make a hell of a lot of money and pay for all those expenses he has over there moving those troops.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to cryptocurrencies, any action you see there?
Love them. I mean, they're just, everybody's bad-mouthing the cryptos. I can't see a positive article in the last week or so about cryptos. Why? Because they had a bit of a correction, and they scare everybody out, and they say, this is it. The faint-hearted should stay away from crypto. The smartest money in the world is buying heavily into the cryptos. They're moving dramatically into Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the alternate currencies. This is the future. So it's going to scare the average person out or try to scare them out, and they're going to accumulate all these positions, and it's going to be in the non-fungible tokens, in the cryptos themselves. In the next 5 years, you're going to see an upward explosion beyond your imagination. I mean, there's going to be returns of 1,000, 2,000% in some of these cryptos compared to the stock market. You might as well forget the stock market. If you're looking for those type of returns, you're going to get them in the crypto market. So just got, there's volatility. We saw Bitcoin, as you know, run up to 20,000, down to 3,000, and up to 60,000, then back to 35,000. I mean, it's probably going to be 500,000 by the time this is over or more. So, you got to look at the charts. You got to catch the swings. You got to realize it's a very volatile market. If you want to be long term, you dollar cost average. You buy a little every month with a fixed amount of money, because that over time you'll get a better entry than try to time it, unless you're a technician in the market as I am. But I just love them. Use any weakness. If you're smart enough to trade them. But if you want to accumulate them, you got to pick your crypto or your non-fungible token. You got about 7,000 to choose from. We do some in our blockchain letter, so you might want to take a look at that. We also have some stocks in there that are in the blockchain crypto business that benefit from the movement in crypto. Sometimes benefit whether the cryptos are up or down because they're cashing in on the volatility. So you might want to take a look at the blockchain letter.
Mark, anything happening on the geocosmic front we should be keeping an eye on?
Nothing hot this week. We mentioned last week that Forbes story about we shouldn't be so worried that an asteroid hits the Earth, that civilization would still, survive. And coming from a financial magazine, I thought that was extraordinary. There are risks out there. There absolutely are risks. Unfortunately, I don't know if we're going to be told about them until it's too late, but I know efforts are being made to divert asteroids because that is a risk to the planet. And we get a lot of close calls that are not really reported. There is a website you can go to and track all that. The solar activity is sort of slowed down here a little bit, but it's supposed to increase as we go forward. And there's still a lot of risk on the planet, volcanic activity and so forth, earthquake activity. So, these things could change the climate more dramatically than people are willing to admit. If we get get a super volcano or several of these blow up, it's going to affect not only the weather, but our ability to produce crops and so forth. So we're monitoring it. I don't say anything imminent is happening this week, but we monitor it. And, we're just small players in a very big universe, and not everything is judged by what's happening in the financial markets in the future.
Well, I remember somebody mentioning that the oceans were warmer. Well, most of the volcanoes on the planet are underwater, and they could be erupting away and we wouldn't even know. I think we were pretty well surprised by that South Pacific volcanic explosion.
It came as no surprise to me because I've been tracking the volcanic activity. We actually did a few interviews on the show about the risk of a supervolcano or something going off, and sure enough, this thing goes off. So I think the planet is at the stage where, there's stuff going on, whether it's a slight polar shift risk, whether it's a internal geocosmic risk with the volcanoes and earthquakes. There's talk about a planet, Planet X, Nibiru, all these researches dating back to the Sumerian civilization, talking about every 3,600 years. There's a planet that circles wide circle around the solar system and approaches the Earth. And I don't know if I don't think we're at that 3,600 year spot, but there's other forces out there that could change the weather on the planet and a lot of crazy things. So we just monitor this stuff. It's fun, and sometimes we can make some predictions about it. But the thing is, we just got to be aware that we're just small insects in a very big game plan. God's big game plan here, and not paying attention to that is dangerous. But I think the powers that be recognize that risk. That's why you have Elon Musk trying to get to Mars. What's he predicting? 1 million people on Mars by the year 2050, which is an extraordinary prediction. Why are we going to Mars? Maybe the recognition is that the Earth may not be so safe in the decades to come. Maybe we need an alternate place to be. All that kind of stuff. It only makes sense. So I think the powers that be know there are risks of the planet, on the planet, and having bases on other planetary bodies, the moon, Mars, and other places that we may already be at. For what I understand is possible, you can understand that we don't want too many people believing that there's risk being on the Earth, because not everybody can get off the Earth. It's going to be a select few that decide they want to leave the planet, but that may be necessary in the generations ahead. So I think smart people recognize there are risks here on Earth, and the Earth is not safe forever, and we got to prepare for that.
Mark, thank you so much for chatting with us.
My pleasure.
My guest has been Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as vrtrader.com. He was speaking to us from Arizona. If you have any questions for Mark or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HouseStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HouseStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HouseStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.